The wind swept across the parched grasslands of Arizona Territory, carrying with it the dust of 1,000 untold stories. Above, turkey vultures circled lazily against the merciless sun, their shadows dancing across the red rock formations that jutted from the earth like ancient sentinels. It was the summer of 1873, and the frontier was a place where civilization and wilderness met in an uneasy truce. Sarah Whitman pushed a strand of auburn hair from her face, squinting against the glare as she made her way along the narrow creek bed. At 19, she had already spent 5 years on this unforgiving land, her family among the latest wave of settlers drawn west by promises of cheap land and new beginnings. Her calloused hands and sun-weathered skin told the story of countless days spent helping her father clear brush, tend livestock, and coax crops from the stubborn soil. The Whitman homestead sat 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, the isolation that Sarah had grown to appreciate. Out here, away from the watchful eyes of her stepmother and the endless chores, she could breathe, she could think. The creek, though reduced to a mere trickle in the summer heat, was her sanctuary, a place where she collected smooth stones and watched for the occasional deer that came to drink. She was bending to examine an interesting piece of quartz when she sensed rather than heard the presence behind her. Every muscle in her body tensed. Stories of raids and violence were common currency among the settlers, whispered around fires and in hushed tones at the trading post. Slowly, she straightened and turned. The man stood perhaps 20 feet away, as still as the rocks themselves. He was Apache. That much was clear from his dress and bearing. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, held back by a simple leather band. He wore deerskin leggings and a cotton shirt, with a rifle slung across his back. But it was his eyes that held her, deep brown, watchful, carrying neither threat nor welcome, only an intense curiosity that matched her own. For a long moment, neither moved. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but something kept her from running. Perhaps it was the way he held himself, alert but not aggressive, like a deer poised to flee rather than a wolf ready to strike. Or perhaps it was something in those eyes, a loneliness that resonated with her own. "I mean no harm," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't sure if he understood English, but words seemed necessary to break the spell of silence. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. Then, to her surprise, he spoke. "The water belongs to no one." His English was accented but clear. Sarah nodded, unconsciously relaxing. "I come here sometimes, to think, as do I." He took a step closer, and she could see he was younger than she'd first thought. Perhaps in his mid-20s. There was a scar along his left cheekbone, pale against his bronze skin. "You are the daughter of the man who builds fences." It wasn't a question. Sarah felt a flush of shame at the description. Her father's fences, cutting across ancient hunting grounds and water sources, were a source of constant tension. "Yes," she admitted. "James Whitman is my father. I am called Nantan," he said. "It means spokesman in your tongue." "Sarah," she offered in return, surprised by her own boldness. He nodded once, then moved past her to the creek. She watched as he knelt and cupped water in his hands, drinking deeply. When he finished, he sat back on his heels and looked at her again. "You are not afraid?" "Should I be?" The question came out more challenging than she'd intended. A smile ghosted across his features. "My people say fear is wisdom, but sometimes—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "Sometimes the heart sees what the mind cannot." Sarah found herself sitting on a nearby boulder, maintaining a careful distance but no longer poised to flee. "How do you speak English so well?" "The missionaries," he said with a shrug that suggested complicated feelings. "They came to teach us their God. I learned their words instead." He picked up a small stone and rolled it between his fingers. "Words are tools, like rifles or plows. They can build or destroy." "And which do you choose?" Sarah asked. His gaze met hers directly. "That depends on what is chosen for me." They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, the creek murmuring between them. Sarah knew she should leave. Her absence would be noted soon, but something held her there. It was as if she'd stepped outside the normal flow of time, into a space where the rules and hatreds of their respective worlds couldn't reach. "I should go," she said finally, standing and brushing dust from her skirts. Nantan rose as well, fluid and graceful. "This place," he said, gesturing to the creek and surrounding rocks. "It has been a sacred spot for my people since before memory. We call it where the water whispers." Sarah looked around with new eyes, seeing not just her private refuge, but a place layered with history and meaning she couldn't fully grasp. "I didn't know. I'm sorry if I—" "You listen to the water," he interrupted gently. "That is enough." As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "Sarah Whitman," the way he said her name, carefully, as if tasting each syllable, made her pause. "Perhaps the water will whisper again?" She looked back at him, understanding the unspoken question. Should they meet again? It was dangerous, foolish even. Their worlds were at war, their peoples sworn enemies. And yet, perhaps it will, she said softly. The walk back to the homestead passed in a blur. Sarah's mind churned with questions and emotions she couldn't name. She'd been raised on stories of Apache brutality, had seen the aftermath of raids on other settlements, but Nantan had been, thoughtful, articulate, human in a way that challenged everything she'd been taught. As she crested the final hill before home, she could see her stepmother, Margaret, standing in the doorway of their adobe house, arms crossed. Sarah sighed and quickened her pace, preparing excuses for her absence. But even as Margaret scolded her for neglecting her duties, even as she resumed the endless round of cooking and cleaning and mending, Sarah's thoughts returned to the creek, to dark eyes that held depths she couldn't fathom, to a voice that spoke of water and whispers and the spaces between worlds. That night, as she lay on her narrow cot listening to her father's snores and the distant howl of coyotes, Sarah pressed her fingers to her lips, remembering. She'd spoken to an Apache warrior, had sat with him in peace beside the water. It seemed impossible, like something from a dream, but the red dust on her boots was real. The memory of his presence, still, watchful, strangely gentle, was real. And the anticipation she felt, the dangerous hope that she might see him again, was the most real thing of all. Outside, the wind continued its eternal conversation with the desert, carrying secrets and promises across the vast darkness, and somewhere, perhaps, another soul lay awake, remembering the same moments, feeling the same inexplicable pull toward something that should not be. The frontier was a hard place, shaped by violence and loss and the relentless struggle for survival. But sometimes, in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, in the whisper of water over stone, something else became possible. Something that transcended the boundaries drawn by fear and hatred. Something that might, against all odds, be called hope. The weeks that followed were marked by stolen moments and dangerous secrets. Sarah found herself inventing reasons to visit the creek, searching for herbs Margaret needed, checking on a supposedly lost calf, gathering stones to repair the garden wall. Each excuse felt thin as paper, but her family, absorbed in their own struggles with the harsh land, seemed not to notice her increasingly frequent absences. She and Nantan never arranged their meetings. Perhaps some instinct warned them that plans could be discovered, promises overheard. Instead, they simply appeared at the creek when they could, sometimes waiting hours for the other, sometimes missing each other entirely. But when they did meet, those brief encounters became islands of peace in an increasingly turbulent world. The territory was sliding toward chaos. News came weekly of raids and retaliations, of cavalry patrols and burned homesteads. At Sunday services in the rough chapel the settlers had built, Reverend Holcomb preached about the savage nature of the heathen, about God's plan for Christian civilization to tame the wilderness. Sarah sat between her father and stepmother, hands folded, eyes downcast, feeling like a fraud. "The Apache are devils," Margaret declared one evening as they prepared supper. "Mrs. Morrison says they killed a family over near Skull Valley, even the children." She shuddered dramatically. "James, you must speak to the other men about organizing more patrols." Sarah's father grunted his agreement, focused on cleaning his rifle. Governor's sending more troops, they say. Should have done it months ago. Sarah, you're very quiet, Margaret observed, her sharp eyes studying her stepdaughter. You haven't been wandering too far from the house, have you? It's not safe for a young woman alone. No, ma'am. Sarah lied smoothly, stirring the pot of beans with unnecessary vigor. Just tired. That night, unable to sleep, she crept to the window and stared out at the star-filled sky, somewhere out there. Nantan moved through the darkness. Did he think of her as she thought of him? Did he feel this same pull, this connection that defied every lesson of their lives? Their next meeting came 3 days later. In the late afternoon when the heat had begun to ease, Sarah arrived first and settled on what had become her usual rock, a smooth granite boulder that retained the sun's warmth. When Nantan appeared, moving with his characteristic silence, she felt the now familiar flutter in her chest. "You are troubled," he said without preamble, studying her face. Sarah laughed bitterly. "Everyone speaks of war, of killing, as if your people are not human at all." He was quiet for a long moment. "And my people speak the same of yours. They say the white man is a disease upon the land, taking what is not given, destroying what cannot be replaced." Are we so wrong? Both sides? No, he admitted. But understanding this does not stop the bleeding. They walked along the creek bed, careful to maintain a proper distance between them. Sarah had become aware of his physical presence in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. The graceful economy of his movements, the way sunlight caught in his dark hair, the rare smiles that transformed his serious face. "Tell me about your family," she said, desperate to know more about him, to understand the life he led beyond these stolen moments. "My father was killed when I was young, fighting the Mexican soldiers. My mother raised me and my sister alone. She is strong, like a mountain." His voice softened. "She would not understand this." He gestured between them. "Nor would mine," Sarah admitted. "My real mother died of fever when I was 14. Father married Margaret within a year. She's not unkind, just rigid, frightened of anything beyond her understanding." "Fear makes people cruel," Nantan observed. "It builds walls higher than mountains." They had reached a cluster of cottonwoods that provided blessed shade. Without thinking, Sarah sat, and after a moment's hesitation, Nantan joined her. Though he kept several feet between them, the propriety of it would have made her laugh if the situation weren't so serious. "Sometimes I dream of leaving," Sarah confessed, surprising herself with the admission. "Of going somewhere where no one knows my name or cares about the color of my neighbor's skin." "Where would you go?" "California, maybe, or north to Oregon, somewhere green." She picked at the grass beside her. "It's a foolish dream. A woman alone has few choices in this world." "Not alone," Nantan said quietly. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Sarah's breath caught. She turned to look at him and found his eyes already on her, dark and intense. "We cannot," she whispered. "I know. It would mean death for you. Exile for me." "I know." And yet neither moved away. The space between them seemed to hum with possibility and danger. Sarah had been courted before, awkward young men at church socials, a traveling merchant who'd tried to impress her with tales of San Francisco, but none of them had ever made her feel this alive, this seen. "I should hate you," she said, her voice barely audible. "Everything I've been taught says I should fear you." "And I should see you as the enemy," he replied. "Your people take our land, kill our game, poison our water. But when I look at you," he paused, seeming to struggle with the words, "I see someone who watches and thinks and feels, someone who does not fit in the box her people have made for her." "You'll forget me," Sarah heard herself say, the words escaping before she could stop them. It was her deepest fear, that this connection, so improbable and precious, would fade like morning mist, that he would return to his world and she to hers, and these moments would become nothing more than a half-remembered dream. Nantan moved then, closing the distance between them though still not touching. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of an oath. "I'll find you, no matter the distance." The promise settled into her bones like a vow before God. She wanted to weep at the fierce certainty in his voice, at the impossibility of it all. Instead, she reached out, slowly, and let her fingertips brush the back of his hand where it rested on the ground. It was the first time they had touched, and the contact sent lightning through her entire being. He turned his hand palm up, letting her fingers rest against his. They sat like that, connected by the smallest of touches, as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. No more words were needed. Everything that mattered had been said in that simple promise, that gentle contact. When Sarah finally rose to leave, her heart was both lighter and heavier than before. They had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Whatever happened now, she was changed. The girl who had first encountered an Apache warrior by the creek was gone, replaced by a woman who knew the dangerous truth of her own heart. The walk home seemed endless. With each step, the weight of the real world settled more heavily on her shoulders. She could hear Margaret's voice before she even reached the house, sharp, worried, angry. "Where have you been? Your father's had half the men out looking for you. There's been an attack at the Bradley Ranch. Apache, they say, 3 dead." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She forced her face to remain calm, even as her mind raced. Had Nantan known? Had he been involved? The thought made her stomach churn. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I was gathering herbs and lost track of time." Her father appeared in the doorway, rifle in hand, face grim. "Get inside, girl. Now." That night, as the men gathered to plan their retaliation, Sarah lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. Outside, she could hear voices raised in anger, calling for blood, for vengeance. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the wild beat of her heart, remembering the warmth of Nantan's palm against hers. They were star-crossed, doomed by the accident of their birth to stand on opposite sides of a war neither had chosen. But his promise echoed in her mind. "I'll find you, no matter the distance." In the darkness, Sarah made her own silent vow. Whatever came, she would not let fear or hatred poison what they had found. It might be impossible, might lead to tragedy, but it was also the truest thing she had ever known. The die was cast. There could be no turning back now. The violence came in waves, each attack breeding retaliation in an endless cycle of grief and rage. The Bradley Ranch massacre had set the territory ablaze with fear and fury. Sarah watched her father and the other men arm themselves with grim determination, their faces hard as the desert rocks. The women gathered in clusters, whispering of atrocities real and imagined, their eyes darting to the horizon as if expecting warriors to materialize from the shimmering heat. For 2 weeks, Sarah dared not venture to the creek. She moved through her days like a ghost, mechanically performing her chores while her thoughts remained fixed on Nantan. Was he safe? Did he know she hadn't abandoned him? The not knowing gnawed at her like a physical pain. Then came the night that shattered her already fragile world. She woke to the sound of horses, many horses, thundering into their yard. Lantern light flickered through the windows as rough voices called for her father. Sarah crept from her bed, pressing her ear to the door. "We know where they're camped," someone was saying. "That Apache band that hit the Bradleys. Tom Wheeler tracked them to Skeleton Canyon. We ride at dawn." "How many?" her father asked. "Maybe 30 Braves, plus women and children. We'll have 50 men, well armed. Time to send a message they won't forget." Sarah's heart seized. Skeleton Canyon was less than a day's ride from where the water whispers. Could Nantan's band be the target? She had to warn him. But how? The men talked and planned until nearly dawn, their voices a low rumble of vengeance. When they finally departed to prepare for the morning raid, Sarah made her decision. She dressed quickly in her darkest clothes, stole some bread and dried meat from the kitchen, and slipped out through her window. The quarter moon provided just enough light to navigate. She had never ventured out alone at night, and every shadow seemed to hold menace. But fear for Nantan drove her forward. She half ran, half stumbled toward the creek, praying she would find him there. He materialized from the darkness so suddenly she nearly screamed. His hand covered her mouth gently, his eyes wide with alarm. "Sarah, what are you doing? It's dangerous! They're coming!" she gasped when he lowered his hand. "The men from town. They know where your people are camped. Skeleton Canyon. They ride at dawn." His face went very still. "How many?" 50, armed." She gripped his arms, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. "You have to warn them. You have to run." For a moment, he simply stared at her, and she saw something in his eyes that took her breath away, a mixture of wonder and pain, and something deeper she dared not name. "You risked your life to warn me," he said softly. "Go," she urged. "Please, there's no time." But instead of leaving, he pulled her against him, holding her with desperate strength. She could feel his heart racing against her chest, matching the wild rhythm of her own. For one perfect, terrible moment, the world contracted to just this, the circle of his arms, the warmth of his breath against her hair, the solid reality of him. "Come with me," he whispered. The words sent shock through her system. "What?" "Come with me," he repeated, pulling back to look into her eyes. "Now, tonight, we can go north, find somewhere." "Nantan, I can't. My family. Your family will never accept what is between us. You know this." His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Sarah, if you stay, we will never see each other again. The blood spilled tomorrow will build walls we cannot cross." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. He was right. She knew he was right. After tomorrow's raid, any chance they had would be drowned in blood. But to leave everything she had ever known, to cast her lot with a man she had met only a handful of times. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "So am I," he said. And somehow that admission gave her courage. "But I am more afraid of a life without you in it." A shout in the distance made them both freeze. Lanterns bobbed through the darkness. Search parties, looking for her. "They've discovered I'm gone," Sarah breathed. Nantan's jaw tightened. "Then we have no time. Choose, Sarah. Choose now." She looked back toward the lights, toward the life she had always known. Then she looked at him, at this man who'd become everything to her in a few stolen moments by a whispering creek. The choice, when it came, was no choice at all. "Yes," she said. He kissed her then, fierce and quick, before taking her hand. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Good. My horse is hidden nearby. We must move fast." They ran through the darkness, Sarah's heart pounding with terror and exhilaration. Behind them, the lights grew closer. Voices calling her name, her father's voice, raw with fear and fury. Margaret's shrill cries. She pushed down the guilt, focusing only on Nantan's hand in hers, on the necessity of escape. His horse, a painted Mustang, stood hobbled in a grove of mesquite. Nantan freed him quickly, swinging up bareback before pulling Sarah up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her face against his back as he urged the horse into motion. They rode hard through the remainder of the night, stopping only to rest the horse and for Nantan to obscure their trail. As dawn broke pink and gold across the desert, they were miles from the Whitman homestead, deep in Apache territory. "My people will not welcome you," Nantan warned as they watered the horse at a hidden spring. "Some will see you as the enemy, a danger to us all. And my people will hunt us," Sarah replied. "They'll see this as kidnapping, as proof of Apache savagery." "Are you sorry?" She thought of the life she had left behind, the safety of routine, the certainty of her place, however constrained. Then she looked at him, at the man who had risked everything to offer her a different future. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not sorry." But even as she spoke, they could see smoke rising in the distance. The raid had begun. Somewhere, people were dying, Apache and white alike, locked in their dance of mutual destruction. Sarah closed her eyes, offering a prayer for the souls being lost. For the families being torn apart. We cannot stop this, Nantan said quietly, reading her thoughts. We can only refuse to be part of it. They rode on as the sun climbed higher, heading north toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the smoke continued to rise, a dark smudge against the pristine sky. Sarah did not look back again. She had made her choice, crossed her Rubicon. Now there was only forward, into whatever destiny awaited them. But she could not shake the feeling that they were riding not toward freedom, but toward a reckoning that would test the very limits of their love. The frontier was vast, but not vast enough to escape the long reach of hate. Somewhere, someday, their past would find them. For now, though, there was only the rhythm of the horse beneath them, the warmth of the sun on their faces, and the fierce, fragile hope that love might be enough to overcome the forces arrayed against them. It was a slim hope, perhaps a foolish one, but it was all they had. The mountains rose before them like ancient guardians, their red rocks blazing in the afternoon sun. For 3 days they had climbed higher into the wilderness, following paths only Nantan knew, drinking from hidden springs, sleeping under stars that seemed close enough to touch. The painted Mustang picked his way carefully among the loose stones, Sarah still clinging to Nantan's back, her arms encircling his waist. They had barely spoken during their flight, focused only on putting distance between themselves and the violence they'd left behind. But now, as they entered a narrow canyon sheltered by towering cliffs, Nantan finally allowed the horse to slow to a walk. "We'll rest here," he said, helping Sarah dismount, her legs nearly buckled. She wasn't accustomed to riding bareback for hours on end, and every muscle ached. The canyon held a small grove of piñón pines and a spring that trickled from the rocks, forming a pool no bigger than a wash basin. Sarah sank down beside it gratefully, cupping the cool water to drink and splash on her dusty face. When she looked up, Nantan was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "What is it?" she asked. "You have not complained, not once." Sarah managed a weak smile. "Would it help if I did?" "No, but most white women." He trailed off, shaking his head. "You are not like them. Nor are you like what I was taught Apache men would be." She countered. "Perhaps we're both learning that what we've been told is not always truth." He unsaddled the horse and hobbled him where he could graze on the sparse grass. From his pack, he produced strips of dried venison and some kind of flatbread, which they shared in companionable silence. The canyon walls provided blessed shade, and for the first time since their flight began, Sarah felt she could breathe. "Tell me about this place," she said, gesturing to the surrounding cliffs. "It is called Canyon of the Eagle's Shadow. My grandfather brought me here when I was young, to teach me hunting. He said the spirits of the old ones still walk here, protecting those who come with good hearts." "Do you believe that?" Nantan considered. "I believe the land remembers. Every footstep, every prayer, every drop of blood. This place has known peace for generations. Perhaps it will shelter us too." As evening approached, he showed her how to gather piñón nuts and identify edible plants. She was a quick student, eager to learn, and he found himself smiling at her determination. When she managed to knock down several pine cones with well-aimed stones, her delighted laugh echoed off the canyon walls. "You would make a good Apache woman," he said, then caught himself. "I mean, I know what you meant," Sarah said softly, "and I take it as the compliment you intended." The temperature dropped sharply as the sun disappeared behind the cliffs. Nantan built a small fire, careful to use dry wood that would produce little smoke. They sat close to its warmth, shoulders touching, watching the stars emerge one by one in the strip of sky visible above. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said eventually, "about my mother, my real mother." Nantan waited, sensing the importance of what she was about to share. She was different from the other women in town. She had learned herbs and healing from her grandmother, who had learned from the native peoples back east. The other women whispered that she was too friendly with the Indians, who sometimes came to trade. They said she had dangerous ideas. Sarah picked up a small stick and traced patterns in the dirt. When she died, they barely mourned her. Oh, they said the proper words, but I could see the relief in their eyes. And Father, he burned all her herb journals, all her medicines, said it was to help me fit in better, to be a proper Christian girl. But you remembered, Nantan said. Some things, not enough. She looked at him. I think she would have understood this. Us. I think she would have been happy I chose love over fear. Nantan reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so tender it made her chest tight. My mother would not understand. She has lost too much to the white soldiers. Her heart has no room for forgiveness. Will I ever meet her? Perhaps, when the wounds are not so fresh, when she can see you for who you are, not what you represent. They were quiet again, listening to the fire crackle and the distant call of an owl. Finally, Nantan reached into a leather pouch at his belt and withdrew something that gleamed in the firelight. I made this many seasons ago, he said, holding out a bracelet of silver and turquoise. The metal work was intricate, featuring tiny, etched symbols that seemed to dance in the flickering light. I was waiting for, I didn't know what. Now I do. Sarah's breath caught as he fastened it around her wrist. The silver was cool against her skin, the weight of it somehow comforting. It's beautiful, she whispered. The symbols are prayers, he explained, tracing them with one finger. For protection, for strength, for finding your way home, wherever that may be. I am home, Sarah said, looking not at the bracelet but at him. Here, with you. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and she felt herself melting into him. When they finally parted, both breathing unsteadily, he rested his forehead against hers. I have nothing to offer you, he said. No house, no land that the white government would recognize. Only a life of running, of hiding. You have yourself, Sarah replied. That's all I need. They made a simple shelter of pine boughs and shared Nantan's blanket, lying close together for warmth as the night grew cold. Sarah rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling safer than she had in years despite being fugitives in the wilderness. What will we do? She asked into the darkness. Where will we go? North, into the mountains where few men venture. I know of others who have made such choices, Apache men with Mexican wives, white traders who have joined the tribes. It is not easy, but it is possible. And if they find us, his arms tightened around her, then we face that together. But Sarah, you must understand, if we are caught, they will not be gentle with you. Your own people will see you as ruined, as a traitor. There will be no going back. There's already no going back, she said firmly. I made my choice by the creek. I chose you. A coyote howled somewhere in the distance, and its cry was answered by another, then another, until the night filled with their wild song. Sarah had always found the sound frightening before, but now it seemed like a celebration, a recognition of two souls who had found each other against all odds. Sleep, Nantan murmured against her hair. Tomorrow we climb higher, and the path is difficult. But Sarah lay awake a while longer, studying the stars through the canyon's narrow opening, feeling the steady rise and fall of Nantan's breathing. The bracelet caught the moonlight, its symbols seeming to pulse with life. She thought of all she had left behind. Her father's bewildered hurt, Margaret's certain condemnation, the safety of the known world, yet she felt no regret. Here in this ancient canyon, held in the arms of a man who had risked everything for her, she was more truly herself than she had ever been. The future was uncertain, filled with danger and hardship, but it was theirs to face together, as sleep finally claimed her. Sarah's last thought was of the promise they had made by the whispering water. He had said he would find her no matter the distance, but in the end, they had found each other, crossing the distances within themselves to reach this moment of perfect, impossible union. The old ones who walked these canyons would understand, she thought drowsily. Love had always been the most powerful medicine, the force that could heal even the deepest wounds between peoples. Perhaps, in time, their love could be part of that healing. For now, it was enough that they had this, one night of peace in a protected place, two hearts beating as one under the vast desert sky. The hunters found them on the 7th day. Sarah had just returned from gathering roots when she heard the shots. 3 rifle cracks that echoed through the canyon like thunder. She dropped her basket and ran, her heart hammering against her ribs. Nantan lay behind a cluster of rocks, blood seeping through his shirt from a wound in his shoulder. "No!" She scrambled to him, tearing at her petticoat to make bandages. "They're coming," he gasped, his face gray with pain. 5 men, maybe more." Sarah's hands shook as she pressed fabric against the wound. The blood kept coming, hot and terrifyingly red. "Can you ride?" "Not fast enough." He gripped her hand with his good arm. "You must go, now." "I'm not leaving you." "Sarah, no." Her voice cracked with desperation. "We go together or not at all." More shots rang out, spurts of rock dust erupting near their position. Sarah could hear voices now, rough male voices calling to each other as they advanced. She recognized one with a chill of horror. Bill Morrison, their neighbor, whose wife had spoken so venomously about the Apache. "I know you're up there, Miss Whitman!" Morrison's voice boomed across the rocks. "Your pa's worried sick. Come on down peaceful-like, and we'll take you home." "And what about him?" Sarah shouted back, still pressing on Nantan's wound. "The Apache? Well now, that's different. He's got to answer for stealing a white woman." "He didn't steal me. I came willingly." Harsh laughter greeted this declaration. "No decent woman goes willing with a savage. He's corrupted your mind, girl. But don't worry. We'll see justice done." Nantan pushed himself up despite Sarah's protests, leaning heavily against the rocks. With his good arm, he checked his rifle. Only 3 bullets left. "Listen to me," he said urgently. "When the fighting starts, you run north through the narrow passage. Follow the dried stream bed until—" "Stop." Sarah took his face between her bloodied hands. "I won't run. I won't leave you to die alone." "Sarah, please!" She silenced him with a fierce kiss. "Remember your promise." "You said you'd find me no matter the distance. Well, the only distance that could separate us now is death, and I won't allow it." The men were closer now. Sarah could see their hats bobbing among the lower rocks. "Think," she commanded herself. Her mother had taught her about healing, but what good was that against bullets? Then her eyes fell on Nantan's water pouch and an idea formed. "Can you hold them off for a few minutes?" she asked. He nodded grimly. "What are you planning?" "Trust me." As Nantan fired carefully placed shots to keep the hunters at bay, Sarah worked with desperate efficiency. She gathered dried brush and the pine pitch they'd collected for waterproofing. Her mother had once shown her how certain saps could create thick smoke when burned, smoke that stung the eyes and choked the throat. The makeshift smoke bombs were crude, but effective. When she lit them and rolled them down the slope, thick white clouds billowed up, drawing curses from the men below. Under cover of the smoke, she helped Nantan to higher ground, half carrying him when his strength faltered. They found refuge in a shallow cave, really more of a deep overhang, screened by a fall of rocks. Sarah eased Nantan down and returned to tending his wound. The bleeding had slowed, but not stopped, and his skin felt too hot. "Clever," he murmured, attempting a smile. "You would make a good warrior." "Save your strength," she ordered, though tears blurred her vision. She knew they had only bought time, not escape. The men would regroup, would search systematically, and Nantan was in no condition to travel. As if reading her thoughts, he caught her hand. "There is another way." "What?" "You go down. Tell them I forced you, that I used Apache medicine to cloud your mind. They want to believe that." "They'll take you home. And let them kill you." Sarah's voice rose. "Never. Better one dies than both." "No." She squeezed his hand hard. "Do you remember what you told me? About places holding memory? This place will remember us. Nantan. It will remember that we chose each other, that we refused to let their hatred separate us." The afternoon wore on with terrible slowness. Sarah could hear the men searching, their voices carrying on the still air. She bathed Nantan's fevered face with precious water, whispered stories to keep him conscious, and prayed to any power that might listen. Her mother's god, his spirits, the ancient stones themselves. As sunset approached, painting the canyon walls blood red, Nantan's breathing grew labored. The wound had stopped bleeding, but infection was setting in. She could smell it, see the angry red streaks spreading from the injury. "Sarah," he whispered. "My vision grows dark." "No," she said fiercely. "Stay with me, please." He lifted his good hand to touch her face. "You gave me more happiness in these few days than I had known in all my years before. That is enough." "It's not enough. We were supposed to have a lifetime. We have had a lifetime, just compressed into days." His thumb brushed away her tears. "Do not let them make you ashamed of what we shared. Promise me." "I promise." She choked out. "But you're going to be fine. I'll find herbs. A shadow fell across the cave entrance. Sarah spun around to find Bill Morrison standing there, rifle leveled. Behind him, she could see other men gathering. "Step away from him. Miss Whitman," Morrison ordered. Sarah moved instead to shield Nantan with her body. "You'll have to shoot me first. Don't be foolish, girl. My father would understand if he could see past his fear," Sarah cried. "This man has shown me more kindness and respect than any of your so-called civilized gentlemen. He's hurt, sick. At least let me tend to him." Morrison's face hardened. "He's Apache. That's all that matters." "Then I'm Apache too," Sarah declared, raising her chin. "I've shared his food, his water, his blanket. By your logic, I'm as corrupted as he is. So shoot us both or leave us be." "Sarah, no," Nantan whispered behind her. Morrison hesitated, clearly not prepared for this defiance. One of the other men, younger, with kinder eyes, stepped forward. "Bill, maybe we should—" "Quiet, Tom," Morrison snapped. Then, to Sarah, "Your PA hired us to bring you home safe. That's what we aim to do." "I am safe," Sarah said. "Safer with him than I ever was in your world. Listen to yourself. He's bewitched you, filled your head with savage notions. The only savage notions I see are yours." Sarah's voice rang off the stone walls. "You who would murder a wounded man, who see only the color of skin and not the human beneath. My mother knew better. She tried to teach me, but I was too afraid to listen. I'm not afraid anymore." Morrison's rifle wavered slightly. The younger man, Tom, spoke again. "Bill, the Apache's dying anyway. Why don't we just take Miss Whitman and go? Because he needs to pay for what he's done." Morrison growled. "What has he done?" Sarah demanded. "Loved me? Shown me that there's another way to live than in fear and hatred? If that's a crime, then I'm guilty too." The standoff stretched taut. Sarah could feel Nantan struggling to rise behind her, heard his labored breathing. She reached back, found his hand, and held it tight. Then, with effort that must have cost him dearly, Nantan spoke. "Let her go home. I will not fight. You can tell them you killed the Apache who stole her. She can say I forced her. No one needs to know the truth." "No," Sarah turned to him. "I won't lie about us. I won't let them turn our love into something shameful." "Live," he said simply. "That is all I want, for you to live." Morrison stepped closer, and Sarah saw something shift in his expression. Not quite softness, but a sort of tired recognition. "Tom's right," he said finally. "The Apache's dying. No need for us to speed it along." He lowered his rifle slightly. "Miss Whitman, I'm giving you one chance. Come with us now, peaceful. We'll tell your PA we found you wandering, out of your mind with desert fever. No one needs to know about this." Sarah looked at Nantan, at his beloved face gray with pain and approaching death. She thought of the life Morrison was offering, a return to safety, to the familiar, with a convenient lie to smooth over her rebellion. All she had to do was abandon the man she loved in his final hours. "No," she said quietly. "I made my choice. I'll stay with him." Morrison's face flushed dark. "Then you're a fool and worse than a fool. When he dies, and he will die, you'll be alone out here. No decent person will take you in, not after this. You'll be ruined. I'll be free, Sarah corrected. Now get out. For a moment, she thought Morrison might shoot them both anyway. Then Tom stepped forward, placing a hand on the older man's arm. Come on, Bill. We did what we could. Let's go. With a final disgusted look, Morrison turned away. On your own head be it, girl. Don't expect mercy when you come crawling back. The men filed away, their footsteps and voices gradually fading into the gathering dusk. Sarah waited until she was sure they were gone before allowing herself to collapse, the strength draining from her limbs. Why? Nantan whispered. Why did you not go? She stretched out beside him on the cold stone, careful of his wound, and laid her head on his chest. His heartbeat was too fast, too weak, but it was there. Because, she said, I would rather have whatever time we have left than a lifetime of pretending this never happened. You are my choice, Nantan. In life or death, you are my choice. His good arm came around her, holding her close. Stubborn woman, he murmured, but she heard the love in it. As darkness fell over the canyon, Sarah held him and whispered stories of the future they might have had, of children who would know both worlds, of a place where love could bridge any divide. She didn't know if he heard her. He had slipped into fevered unconsciousness. But she kept talking, as if her words could tether him to life. The stars emerged one by one, and still she held him, feeling each precious breath, storing up the warmth of him against the cold she knew was coming. Whatever tomorrow brought, they had chosen each other. In a world torn apart by hatred, they had found love. That had to count for something. That had to matter. In the depths of the night, coyotes began their wild singing, and Sarah listened without fear. They sang of survival against all odds, of bonds that death itself could not break. She pressed her lips to Nantan's burning forehead and added her own whispered prayer to their song. Let him live, she begged the listening darkness. Please, let him live. The fever broke on the third night. Sarah had barely slept, using every scrap of knowledge her mother had passed down. She'd found desert willow bark to bring down the fever, prickly pear to fight infection, and had kept the wound clean with boiled water from the tiny spring. When Nantan's eyes finally opened, clear and focused, she wept with relief. You stayed, he whispered, his voice hoarse but wondering. Where else would I be? She helped him sip water, her hands trembling with exhaustion. For 2 more days they remained in the cave while he regained strength. Sarah ventured out only to gather food and medicine, always watching for signs of pursuit. But the hunters seemed to have kept their word. No one came. On the 5th day, a different danger arrived. Sarah was returning with roots and berries when she saw them. 3 Apache warriors on horseback, studying the signs of their camp. Her heart froze. She recognized one from descriptions Nantan had given. His cousin, Yellowhawk, a man who had lost his entire family to white soldiers. Before she could decide whether to run or hide, Yellowhawk spotted her. His face went hard as granite. He barked something in Apache, and the other 2 warriors raised their rifles. Wait! Sarah stood her ground, though her knees shook. Nantan! I'm with Nantan! Yellowhawk's eyes narrowed. He dismounted and approached her, circling like a predator. When he spoke, it was in accented English. Where is my cousin? In the cave. He's hurt. Sarah forced herself to meet his fierce gaze. I've been caring for him. The warrior's lip curled. Caring for him, or leading more white killers to finish what they started? I would die before I let anyone hurt him, Sarah said firmly. Yellowhawk studied her for a long moment, then gestured sharply to his companions. They dismounted and followed as Sarah led them to the cave, her heart pounding with each step. When Nantan saw his cousin, he struggled to sit up, speaking rapidly in Apache. Yellowhawk's responses were sharp, angry. Sarah didn't need to understand the words to know he was furious about Nantan's choice, about her presence. The argument grew heated until Nantan, still weak, began coughing. Enough, Sarah said, moving to support him. He needs rest, not fighting. Yellowhawk turned on her. You speak as if you have the right. You are nothing here. Less than nothing. She saved my life, Nantan said in English, his arm coming around Sarah protectively. When her people came to kill me, she stood between us. When they offered to take her home, she chose to stay. Foolish woman, Yellowhawk spat. And more foolish you, cousin, for believing her lies. She will betray you. It is what her kind do. Like my kind betrayed my mother? Sarah shot back. She was called witch for learning from your people, for seeing the wisdom in your ways. Not all whites are the same, just as not all Apache are the same. This seemed to surprise Yellowhawk. He exchanged glances with his companions, then spoke again to Nantan in their language. The conversation was long and seemed to cover much ground. Yellowhawk gestured frequently, his voice ranging from angry to pleading. Finally, Nantan spoke in English, his words careful. My cousin brings news. The army is planning a major campaign. They mean to force all Apache onto the reservation at San Carlos. Those who refuse. He didn't need to finish. We ride north, Yellowhawk said. To the mountains where Geronimo gathers warriors. Come with us, cousin. Bring your woman if you must, but come. Sarah felt Nantan tense beside her. She knew what this meant. A choice between the warriors' path of resistance and the hope of peace they'd dreamed of finding. I need time to think, Nantan said. Yellowhawk's expression darkened. Time is what we do not have. Choose, cousin. Your people or her. You cannot have both. After the warriors left to make camp nearby, Sarah and Nantan sat in heavy silence. She could feel the weight of decision pressing on him, understood the impossible position he was in. You should go with them, she said quietly. He turned to her sharply. What? Your cousin is right. I brought you nothing but trouble. Your people need you. Sarah, I can make my way to California. Or maybe Mexico. He silenced her with a kiss, fierce and desperate. When they parted, his eyes burned with intensity. Did you think I would abandon you after everything? I'm not Apache. I'll never be accepted by your people. And I will never be accepted by yours. So we make our own way. He cupped her face gently. Unless you've changed your mind. I would understand. Never, she said fiercely. I don't want you to lose everything because of me. I have lost nothing that matters, and gained everything. That night, Yellowhawk came to the cave alone. His manner was less hostile, but still wary. He spoke to Nantan for a long time in Apache, and Sarah caught her own name several times. Finally, he turned to her. My cousin tells me you know healing, that you saved him with white woman's medicine that is like our own. My mother taught me. She learned from Eastern tribes before coming west. Yellowhawk considered this. Show me. Sarah demonstrated her knowledge of the medicinal plants she'd gathered, explaining their uses. Yellowhawk watched intently, occasionally nodding. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. My sister's child is sick with a coughing illness, he said finally. The white doctor at the agency gives medicine that does not help. Could you? I could try, Sarah said carefully. But I'm not a real healer, just someone who remembers her mother's teachings. Yellowhawk stood abruptly. We leave at dawn. You will come. It wasn't a request. Sarah looked at Nantan, who seemed as surprised as she was. Both of you, Yellowhawk clarified. My cousin is still weak. He needs tending, and the child needs medicine. His expression remained hard, but something in his eyes had shifted. We will see. They broke camp before sunrise, Sarah riding behind Nantan on a horse Yellowhawk had brought. The journey took 2 days through country, so rough Sarah wondered how anyone could navigate it. They spoke little, but she felt the other warriors watching her constantly, evaluation in their dark eyes. The Apache camp was smaller than she'd expected, perhaps 30 people, mostly women and children. They looked at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. A few spat on the ground as she passed. Yellowhawk led them to a wickiup where a young woman sat cradling a small boy, perhaps 3 years old. His breathing was labored, his small chest working hard for each breath. The woman looked up with desperate eyes that widened when she saw Sarah. "This is my sister, Morning Star," Yellowhawk said in English. "Her son is called Small Eagle." Sarah knelt beside them, smiling gently at the mother before examining the child. She recognized the symptoms, not the lung sickness the agency doctor probably assumed, but a reaction to something in his environment. She'd seen similar in white children who couldn't tolerate certain foods. "Has he been eating anything new?" she asked. From the agency rations. Through Nantan's translation, she learned the child had been given condensed milk and wheat flour, foods his body clearly couldn't process. Sarah explained carefully, suggesting a return to traditional foods and teaching Morningstar how to make a soothing tea from mullein leaves for his breathing. Within a day, Small Eagle's breathing eased. Within 3, he was playing with the other children. Morningstar wept with gratitude, pressing Sarah's hands and speaking rapidly in Apache. "She says you have given her back her heart," Nantan translated, his voice thick with emotion. The change in the camp's attitude was gradual but noticeable. Women began to nod when she passed. An elderly grandmother showed her how to properly prepare mesquite beans. Children, ever curious, crept closer to examine her strange pale skin and reddish hair. But Sarah knew this was temporary. Yellowhawk had made that clear. They were guests only until Nantan was healed and Small Eagle was well. Soon, they would have to make their choice, join the resistance or find their own path. One evening, as Sarah helped Morningstar tend the cook fire, Yellowhawk approached. His face was troubled. "Scouts report soldier patrols to the south and east," he said. "They search for someone. A white woman, they say, stolen by Apache." Sarah's blood chilled. Her father hadn't given up. "We move camp tomorrow," Yellowhawk continued, "north into the mountains." He paused, studying her. "You saved my sister's child. For this, I owe you a debt, but I cannot protect you if the soldiers come. My people must come first." "I understand," Sarah said quietly. Yellowhawk turned to go, then stopped. "My cousin says you chose him over your own kind, that you stood between him and white guns. I did not believe it. White women do not have such courage." He met her eyes. "I was wrong." It was as close to acceptance as she would get. Sarah knew, but it was enough. That night, she and Nantan held each other in their borrowed shelter, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices. The brief respite was ending. Soon they would have to decide, attempt to disappear into Mexico, join the doomed resistance, or try to find some other path in a world that had no place for their love. "Whatever comes," Nantan whispered against her hair, "we face it together." "Together," she agreed, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted of promises and sorrow and fierce, undying hope. The choice was made for them at dawn. Sarah woke to the thunder of hoofbeats and Morningstar's scream. Cavalry, 2 full companies by the sound of it. She reached for Nantan, but he was already moving, pushing her toward the back of the wickiup. "Stay hidden," he commanded, grabbing his rifle, but there was nowhere to hide. Soldiers surrounded the camp, their blue uniforms dark against the pale morning sky. Sarah heard the commander shouting orders, demanding the return of the kidnapped white woman. "I won't let them take you," Nantan said fiercely. "You can't fight them all." Sarah gripped his arm. "And I won't watch you die trying." Before he could stop her, she stepped out of the shelter. The camp erupted in chaos, women grabbing children, warriors reaching for weapons, soldiers tightening their circle. Sarah walked steadily toward the commander, her head high despite her trembling knees. "I'm Sarah Whitman," she called out. "I'm the one you're looking for." The commander, a grizzled major with sun-weathered features, dismounted and approached her. His eyes took in her Apache dress, her sun-darkened skin, the turquoise bracelet on her wrist. "Miss Whitman, your father has been sick with worry. He hired us to find you, to bring you home safe." "I'm safe," Sarah said quietly. "I chose to leave. No one forced me." The major's expression hardened. "Ma'am, you've clearly been through an ordeal. These savages have confused your mind, but you're safe now." We'll take you home where you belong." "This is where I belong," Sarah insisted, gesturing to the camp. To Nantan, who had emerged despite her wishes, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Don't be foolish, girl." The Major's voice turned sharp. "Look around you. Look at how these people live. Like animals in the dirt. Is this what you want? To throw away your life, your family's good name, for some primitive—" "Choose your words carefully," Sarah interrupted, her voice cold. "That primitive saved my life. These people took me in when my own kind would have seen me dead. They showed me kindness when yours show only hatred." The Major sighed. "I have my orders. Miss Whitman, you're coming with us, willing or not." He gestured to his men. "Sergeant, take her." "No!" Nantan stepped forward, but a dozen rifles swung toward him. "Don't!" Sarah pleaded. "Please don't give them an excuse." The sergeant, a younger man with kind eyes that reminded her of Tom from the hunting party, approached carefully. "Miss, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Sarah looked around the camp, at Morningstar clutching Small Eagle, at Yellowhawk held at gunpoint but still proud, at the elderly grandmother who had taught her to grind mesquite. Finally. She looked at Nantan, memorizing every line of his beloved face. "If I come willingly," she said to the Major, "will you leave them in peace? No arrests? No forced march to the reservation?" The Major considered. "If you come now, without fuss, I'll report that we found you wandering alone. The Apache camp." He shrugged. "What Apache camp?" It was the best she could hope for. Sarah nodded. "Let me say goodbye." 2 minutes. The Major conceded. Sarah went to Nantan, who stood rigid as stone. "This is not goodbye," she whispered fiercely. "Remember your promise." "Sarah, no." His voice broke. "I cannot let them—" She pressed her fingers to his lips. "You must, for your people, for the children." She removed the turquoise bracelet and pressed it into his hand. "Keep this safe for me. I'll come back for it." "The distance is too great," he said, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Your world will swallow you. You will forget." "Never," she swore. "You are carved into my very bones. Nantan, distance means nothing. Time means nothing. I will find my way back to you." The sergeant touched her shoulder gently. "Miss, we need to go." Sarah allowed herself one last moment, pressing her forehead to Nantan's, breathing him in. Then she turned and walked to the waiting horses, not looking back. If she looked back, her resolve would crumble. The ride to Fort Apache took 3 days. Sarah spoke to no one, ate mechanically, stared at the horizon. The soldiers treated her with uncomfortable deference, clearly unsure how to handle a white woman who preferred Apache company. Only the sergeant, whose name she learned was Michael O'Brien, attempted conversation. "Your father's at the fort," he said on the second day. "He's been there for weeks, coordinating search parties." Sarah closed her eyes. She could imagine her father's face, the disappointment and confusion. How could she make him understand? Fort Apache was a sprawling complex of buildings baking under the desert sun. As they rode through the gates, Sarah saw familiar faces, settlers from town, their expressions ranging from pity to disgust. Word of her willful departure with an Apache warrior had clearly spread. Her father waited on the porch of the commander's quarters. James Whitman had aged years in weeks, his hair more gray, deep lines etched around his eyes. When he saw her, his face crumpled. "Sarah, my God, Sarah!" She dismounted and went to him, letting him embrace her though she felt like a stranger in his arms. He wept against her hair, murmuring thanks to God for her safe return. "I'm taking you home," he said when he finally pulled back. "Margaret's beside herself. We'll put this behind us, start fresh, maybe send you to your aunt in San Francisco until talk dies down." "Father, don't worry about what people say. You were taken against your will. Confused. Anyone can see that." "I wasn't taken," Sarah said firmly. "I chose to go." Her father's face went still. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying. I fell in love. Father, with a good man who happened to be Apache. I left willingly." The slap came so fast she didn't see it, just felt the sharp sting across her cheek. Her father had never struck her before, and they stared at each other in mutual shock. "Don't," he said, voice shaking. "Don't say such things. You're my daughter. My good, Christian daughter, not some squaw." The ugly word hung between them like a blade. Sarah straightened, touching her reddened cheek. "Then perhaps I'm not your daughter anymore," she said quietly. The journey home was silent misery. Margaret alternated between weeping and lecturing, cataloging Sarah's sins and the shame she'd brought upon the family. Her father wouldn't look at her. The house, when they reached it, felt like a prison. They locked her in a room at night, set Margaret to watch her during the day. The windows were nailed shut. When Sarah refused to eat, trying to force their hand, they brought the doctor who prescribed laudanum for her hysteria. She poured it out the window rather than let it cloud her mind. Weeks crawled by. Sarah existed in a haze of memory and longing, pressing her hand to her wrist where the bracelet had rested, whispering Nantan's name like a prayer. She heard gossip from Margaret's friends. The Apache were being systematically rounded up, forced onto reservations. Some bands fought, many died. Was Nantan among them? The not knowing ate at her like acid. 3 months after her return, Reverend Holcomb came to dinner. Over the meal, he spoke pompously about the taming of the frontier and God's plan for Christian civilization. Then he turned to Sarah with a smile that made her skin crawl. "I've spoken to your father, Miss Whitman. Despite your unfortunate experiences, I believe you can still be saved, redeemed through holy matrimony. I would be honored to take you as my wife." Sarah stared at him, this soft, pale man with his weak chin and self-righteous eyes. "No." "Sarah," Margaret gasped. "I said no." Sarah stood. "I will never marry you or anyone else. My heart belongs to another." "That savage?" Holcomb's face flushed. "You would choose eternal damnation over salvation?" "I choose love over fear." Sarah replied, "I choose truth over your lies. And yes, I choose him over you, now and always." Her father stood slowly, face like thunder. "Go to your room. We'll discuss this later." But Sarah knew there would be no discussion. That night, she heard them planning. Holcomb would return next week to perform the marriage. Willing or not, they would save her soul despite herself. She sat by her nailed-shut window, staring at the stars. Somewhere, Nantan watched the same sky. She pressed her fingers to the glass, whispering the words he'd taught her in Apache. Words of love, of promise, of hope against hope. "Find me," she breathed into the darkness. "Please, my love, find me." Because she was dying here, slowly but surely, not in body. They kept her fed and clothed and sheltered, but in spirit, in soul, in all the ways that mattered. Each day in this prison of propriety and prejudice drained more of her essence, tried to reshape her into something small and acceptable. But late at night, when the house slept, Sarah would close her eyes and remember the feel of red rock beneath her hands, the taste of spring water in a hidden canyon, the warmth of Nantan's arms around her, the fierce freedom of choosing love over safety. They could lock her body, but her heart remained free. And someday, somehow, she would find her way back to where the water whispered and love was stronger than all the forces trying to tear them apart. She had to believe that. It was all that kept her sane. The night before her forced wedding, Sarah heard it, a coyote's call, but not quite right. Too close to the house, too deliberate in its pattern. Her heart leaped as she recognized the signal Nantan had taught her months ago. 3 short calls, 1 long, "I am here." She pressed against the window, straining to see through the darkness. Nothing moved in the yard below, but she knew he was there. Somehow, impossibly, he had come. Moving quickly, she dressed in her darkest clothes and grabbed the few things that mattered. Her mother's journal, hidden beneath loose floorboards, and a small pouch of seeds from plants she'd gathered at the creek. The window was still nailed shut, but months of secret work with a stolen kitchen knife had loosened the boards. The call came again, closer now. Sarah's hands shook as she pried at the window frame. Just a little more. Going somewhere? She spun to find Margaret in the doorway, lamp in hand, but instead of raising an alarm, her stepmother quietly closed the door behind her. I knew this day would come, Margaret said softly. I've seen how you waste away, like a plant torn from its soil. Sarah tensed, ready to fight if necessary. You can't stop me. No, Margaret agreed, surprising her. I can't, and I won't. What? Margaret set down the lamp and moved to the window, examining Sarah's handiwork. I was young once. I loved a man my father didn't approve of, a traveling merchant, Irish Catholic. Father threatened to disown me if I married him. She pulled at the loosened boards with surprising strength. I chose safety, respectability, and I've regretted it every day since. The boards gave way with a soft crack. Cool night air flooded in, carrying the scent of sage and freedom. Why? Sarah whispered. Because I won't watch another woman die slowly in a cage of others' making. Margaret pressed a small bundle into Sarah's hands. Food, water, and coins. Go, quickly. I'll tell them I found the window open in the morning. Sarah impulsively hugged her stepmother, feeling the older woman stiffen, then slowly Hari returned the embrace. Be happy, Margaret whispered. Be free. Sarah slipped through the window and dropped to the ground, her moccasined feet silent on the earth. She'd kept them hidden, wearing them each night to remember. A shadow detached from the barn, Nantan, thinner than before, travel-worn, but alive and real and here. She flew into his arms, burying her face against his chest, breathing him in. He held her as if she might vanish, his hands tangling in her hair. You came, she breathed. You found me. I promised, he said simply. Though it took longer than I wished, the army, the reservation. He pulled back to look at her face in the moonlight. Are you certain? If we leave now, there is no returning. I've been certain since the day we met. She took his face in her hands. Where do we go? North, beyond the border into Canada, where some of our people have found refuge, or west to California, where a mixed couple might disappear in the mining camps. The choice is yours. No, Sarah corrected. The choice is ours. He smiled then, the expression transforming his serious face. From his pack, he withdrew something that gleamed in the moonlight, her turquoise bracelet. I kept it safe, he said, fastening it around her wrist, as I kept my promise. They had 2 horses waiting in a grove beyond the property line. As Sarah mounted, she looked back once at the house that had been her prison. A figure stood at an upstairs window, Margaret, watching. Sarah raised her hand in farewell and thought she saw an answering gesture before the curtain fell. They rode through the remainder of the night, setting a hard pace. As dawn broke, painting the desert in shades of gold and rose, they stopped to rest the horses at a hidden spring. The place was familiar, not quite where the water whispers, but similar in its ancient peace. How did you survive? Sarah asked as they shared water and dried meat. The reservation, the army patrols. Yellowhawk helped, though he called me 7 kinds of fool. Nantan's expression grew somber. Many didn't survive. The ones who fought are mostly dead or imprisoned. The rest are penned like cattle, dying slowly of disease and despair. I'm sorry, Sarah said, knowing how inadequate the words were. It is not your fault. You cannot carry the sins of your people any more than I can carry those of mine. He touched her cheek gently. We can only choose differently, choose better. They traveled for weeks, avoiding settlements and patrols, living off the land as Nantan had taught her. Sarah's skin darkened under the sun. Her hands grew calloused from work, but she had never felt more alive. They followed ancient trails known only to the Apache, crossing from Arizona into New Mexico, then angling northwest toward Colorado. One evening, camped by a stream in a valley untouched by settlement, Nantan performed a simple ceremony. With no priest or witnesses save the stars, they pledged themselves to each other, she in the words her mother had taught her, he in the language of his people. They exchanged no rings, signed no papers. But Sarah had never felt more married than in that moment, with the night wind as their choir and the earth as their altar. "My wife," Nantan said in wonder, as if tasting the words. "My husband," she replied, and kissed him under the vast sky. They found work at a mining camp in southern Colorado, where desperate men cared little about skin color if you could work hard and cause no trouble. Sarah used her healing knowledge to tend injured miners, while Nantan's skills as a tracker and hunter kept the camp supplied with fresh meat. They were curiosities, the mixed couple who kept to themselves, but gradually earned respect through competence and quiet dignity. Still, Sarah knew they couldn't stay forever. Word would spread. Someone would recognize her from the wanted posters her father had surely circulated. So when spring came, they moved on, always drifting northwest, toward the promise of true frontier. It was in a nameless valley in Montana that they finally stopped. The place called to them, a sheltered dell with good water, game-rich forests, and soil that promised successful farming. Best of all, the nearest town was 3 days' ride, and the few trappers they encountered asked no questions. They built a small cabin with their own hands, learning together through trial and error. Sarah planted a garden with seeds she'd saved, while Nantan constructed corrals for the horses they'd acquired. It was hard work, harder than anything she'd known, but it was theirs. The first winter nearly broke them. Snow deeper than Sarah had imagined. Temperatures that froze the water in their cabin. They survived on stored food and stubborn determination, wrapped in buffalo robes, telling stories to pass the long nights. When spring finally came, they emerged thin but triumphant. No one said it would be easy, Nantan observed, watching Sarah coax the first green shoots from the thawing ground. "Easy was never what I wanted," she replied. "I wanted real, I wanted true, I wanted you." Their second year was better. They learned the rhythms of the land, stored better provisions, made cautious contact with other scattered settlers who proved more accepting than either had dared hope. An elderly French trapper and his Crow wife became particular friends, sharing knowledge and occasional meals. It was late summer when Sarah knew for certain. She'd suspected for weeks, but wanted to be sure before telling Nantan. She found him by the stream, setting fish traps, and simply took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. The joy that lit his face was brighter than the sun on water. "A child? A child," she confirmed. "Born of two worlds, belonging to both." He swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with tears. "I never dared hope. Hope is what we do best," Sarah reminded him. Against all odds, despite all obstacles. As autumn painted the aspens gold, Sarah stood in the doorway of their cabin, watching Nantan work with the horses. Her hand rested on her rounding belly, feeling the first flutters of movement within. The turquoise bracelet caught the light, its symbols of protection and homecoming as meaningful now as ever. They had traveled so far from that first meeting by the Whispering Water, through danger and separation, prejudice and pain. But love had been their compass, trust their trail, and courage their constant companion. They had built something new in this wild place, not Apache, not white, but uniquely theirs. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold. Soon, Nantan would come in for dinner. They would share the day's small victories and defeats, plan for tomorrow, dream of their child's future. It was a simple life, but it was theirs, chosen freely and lived fully. Sarah smiled, remembering the frightened girl who had once thought love impossible between their peoples. That girl couldn't have imagined this, the profound peace of a life built on mutual respect, the deep joy of a love that had conquered every obstacle. In the distance, coyotes began their evening song, wild and free. Sarah listened without fear, hearing in their calls the voice of the frontier itself, Dangerous, yes, but also full of infinite possibility for those brave enough to forge their own path. She had been told she would forget him. Instead, they had written their own story across the wide sky, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, understanding over ignorance, hope over hate. And their story was only beginning. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West. Where are you enjoying this story from? Please share your location in the comments so we can connect with listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Sarah and Nantan's journey. Your comments and perspectives mean everything to us.